converted to digital technology, and we are in support of this item. We operate digital billboards in several cities in the Metroplex, and it just allows us to serve our customers better with real-time messaging. They can change their messages multiple times. The actual image is static. It's not animated, so it's just a way for us to change copy remotely. And it also allows us flexibility to donate public service advertising. And we do emergency messaging, and we also donate time to different cities for city messaging. So this technology is really helpful for those things. The proposal includes a minimum duration of each message of 10 seconds. And the industry standard and the regulations set down by TxDOT in conjunction with the Federal Highway Administration is 8 seconds. And so that's how we operate all throughout the Metroplex. And so we just respectfully request that you adjust that 10-second duration to 8 seconds. It just is uniformity for the other cities and the state. Also, the language is that the signs that are within 40 feet of the frontage road are eligible for this conversion. And we have 3 billboards that might be under consideration, and depending on how that's measured, we might not be eligible because it's usually the measurement is to the right-of-way for setbacks, and because it says the frontage road, we don't know if we would be in conformance with that. So we were hoping to maybe liberalize that a little bit, either increase the distance or define it as measured from the right-of-way. And if y'all have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Anybody have any questions for Ms. Moore?
Only question right now, can you tell us how many signs that Clear Channel has in place within the city limits as of today?
I should have looked that up before I came, but I think we have 4.
4. Thank you.
David, any questions?
Clarification, along I-20. We have additional ones inside the city, but that, because the language is just for I-20, it would be along I-20.
No questions for Ms. Moore. I'll have a question for our director when he comes up.
Okay. Kenneth?
Thank you.
All right. I'll close that public hearing, then I'll open up the public hearing on case PZ 2610. No one has signed up for that, so I will close that public hearing. Next item is ordinance 799, consideration of proposed amendment to the UDC. Do we have somebody from staff to speak on that? Nope.
Just a moment. Just a moment, Mr. Mayor. Sorry for the delay. Well. Okay. Okay, and we're talking about the ordinance where we're modifying the billboard signage. So what we're really doing here is there's just a few things that we're doing. In essence, on this particular case, the intent is to bring our ordinance more in line with common practices for the areas that are in adjacency to I-20 in relationship to the questions that were previously, or the comments that were previously asked. Staff has no objections to any of those changes. 8 seconds versus 10 seconds is really a fairly modest change. And she is correct in that that is a standard text dot element. So unless the council has an objection and wants a slower rate, so you reduce the number of signs that would be depicted, staff has no objection to making that change. Also, from what's been presented, also in relationship to the definitions of where the sign would be, that was always our intent, would be the frontage road, meaning the edge of the right of way, from the edge of the right of way interior or away from the highway an additional 40 feet. So that would be any of those signs that are obviously in close proximity to I-20 would be the ones that we would be interested in making those changes for. In addition to the signage in terms of the billboard type signs, we are looking at making a change as well on the digital signage, allowing those to be made available in the Old Town, specifically in places where you have public uses or lands that are owned by a public entity. So we have places, for example, like the senior center and the library, where signage like this would be particularly useful in terms of helping them with their programming. They do a lot of programming during the summer. They do a lot of programming, obviously, for seniors, things of that nature. And the current rules in the Old Town District do not allow this kind of signage. I don't think it's an appropriate type of signage generally within the Old Town District. Typically in historical type areas, you don't see a lot of digital signage. You want them to be more static in nature to sort of create that ambiance. But in this particular case where you have sort of civic institutions, school districts, city institutions, things of that nature, where you have those kind of support elements, we're asking that monument type signs be allowed with these electronic signage, with it being reduced in sign, not gigantic like a billboard, but an appropriate size, being 3 foot high and 6 foot total sign height. So these are the specific elements that we're talking about in terms of changes. What we're basically doing is we're creating 3 different sign types in there, where we had less than that before. And this is the change in terms of the area of Old Downtown or the Old Town areas, basically allowing 1 per parcel or lot, right? And then we're also making this change in the EC1 and EC2 districts. These are where, and along 287, we see these EC1 right next to the highway as well. We have a number of signs in those areas where this particular zoning district is in close proximity to Interstate 20. And so it's an area where it's attractive for hotels, restaurants, gas stations, things of that nature. Adjacent to a high-speed highway, you'll also be aware that Interstate 20 is being modified, right? And so having additional signage of larger area makes it a little easier for folks to find a hotel late at night. They can see this thing coming up over the hill and they have adequate time to exit. Since nowadays you can't just exit right next to them. Usually you have to exit quite a distance back before you can hit those facilities. So we think that this is a reasonable change as well, primarily for public safety. So they can see these. We're not limiting anything in terms of the tying it to specific land uses, right? Because these districts are fairly limited already. They're already in close proximity to the highway. It just seems like it's not a huge change from what we had in the past. It's just allowing the signs to be a little bigger and be digital, right? And it would enhance those businesses. And it's not out of keeping with what you see currently on Interstate 20 in the communities, either to the east or west. It's pretty common. And this is, once again, we're talking about a little bit more showing the specific language in there. If I wanted to really just focus on the reasons why we're making these changes and make myself available to the council if you have any specific questions about the ordinance text.
David?
My only question was whether there was any concern with changing the time from 10 seconds to 8 seconds, but the director already answered that. So I think we're good there. No further questions. Thank you.
Persons?
I have no questions right now.
Geddes?
I have no questions.
Ryan?
Yes, right now, how do we distinctify the difference between a billboard compared to a business sign like the QT?
Right. That's a very good question. It's one that many cities and even the Supreme Court has struggled with, right? Because a sign is a sign is a sign, but that's not always true. And we're dealing with First Amendment issues as well, right? So one thing we cannot do is we cannot regulate content, with the possible exception of billboards, right? One of those gray areas. In essence, what a billboard is what is commonly referred to as off-site advertising, right? So generally, if your site is here and your sign is someplace else on a different parcel or property, off-site advertising is the common means of making that determination. But also, oftentimes, you look at the size of the sign and the orientation of the sign. Who is it intended to be seen by, right? Is it meant to be seen by local traffic, or is it meant to be seen for long distances, for example, from people maybe outside the community, right? Traveling through, et cetera. So a billboard is oftentimes like the number one component typically is offsite. And if it is on a site and it's advertising that site, McDonald's, big sign, right? Whataburger, big giant sign, even if it's a pole sign, even if it's really big, that's an on-site sign. Even if it's as big as a billboard, it's an on-site sign because it's advertising for a business at that specific location.
I think you answered that question. The open concern that I have is that we have limited space. There's limited exposure that we have. And so I'm asking myself, what is the best way to manage that exposure space that is available now, as well as through the next 5 years and the growth that we expect?
Current TxDOT regulations, I believe, between these particular signage that are billboards, and given their proximity to the interstate, these all have to get clearance through TxDOT as well, right? And this all comes out of way back in the day. Remember the Keep America Beautiful? You know, when the Indian was crying, everything. A big part of that was cleaning up billboards because billboards were kind of popping up everywhere on the highway, and you almost couldn't see any place for all the billboards popping up. So as a part of those beautification acts, you started seeing things like restrictions on billboards and requiring separation between them so that you didn't get so much of a concentration of them. You couldn't actually see the scenery, right? And that's the standard that TxDOT. Now it varies from state to state, but in Texas, TxDOT that manages most of our large highways has a 1,500-foot. And now I think it can vary in some places based on the density of the location. And of course, some signs were put up back in the day, right? So they have some vested rights, et cetera. So you do see some places where it's a little closer than that. But that's, and out in the hinterland, you know, when there's not a lot of population, sometimes they're miles and miles and miles before you see one.
Jeff?
Yeah, I have no problem with the signage code. And I would recommend the 8 seconds as well as a state standard. That way we can kind of line up with that. But on the Old Town side, I guess my question is, I have no problem with the library having electronic anything. And I was trying to think of like, who would that affect? Because there's not that many businesses there. So the only one I can come up with is the Methodist Church. So the Methodist Church not allowed to have electronic sign is what we're saying?
This is intended for public entities, right? The way I've crafted it. So it would be a governmental entity, a county, a city, a state, or a school district would be authorized to have these kinds of electronic uses, these kind of electronic signs. So no, it would not allow a church institution to do
So
so.
I guess my question is why? Because if there's not a single business in Old Town, and I get the scope of why we would want this to to preserve the history and the look and the feel, but the only one that would restrict would be the church if they wanted a little electronic sign saying "See you next Monday."
Well, there was no intent to specify or take action that would restrict a specific business here. What motivated this was during a staff meeting, our library director had indicated in a conversation that she was, looking for ways to promote her programming. She'd had a lot of success
Sure.
in that, and she was looking for more ways to grow that. And this seemed like one of those ways. Since we were going to be doing a sign anyway that addressed this type of sign, I suggested, well, let's go ahead and allow you to have a small monument sign. We had to do that in a reasonable way. And rather than having us do it and then the school come back at us and say, well, why can't we? We do program, we do varsity game on such and such night, whatever, right? And then we have a park, right, that is used for various kinds of social activities. It seemed to me that those would be the entities that would have a legitimate community-wide basis for needing this advertising. I didn't actually consider churches in that regard. Typically, they tend to be fairly smaller in terms of their reach and advertisement to their their specific
Well,
congregation.
technically, it's the only business in the district, right? Because we're just specifically talking about Old Town.
Right.
So how does the school district, where's the school district in the Old Town as well?
That I wouldn't. I think they have some property in there of course, on the opposite side of the street on the highway. I think that their main campus there, I believe that's Old Town, if I remember
Delaney?
correctly.
I don't think so.
And if it's not, I could be wrong on that regard. If they don't have any property, but if they do acquire it, for example, if they would put a
Sure.
school there for some reason, it would give them the opportunity to do so. And if the council would like to open this up to nonprofits, you certainly can. But then, of course, there's a question of proliferation that happens then. If a church rents a space in a suite in Old Town, for example, in Town Square, would they be allowed to have electronic signage for bingo or whatever else it is that they're doing?
Yeah, but that's a zoning thing, right? So they can't just get a house. Well, they can have a church there, but they can have a business there
Right.
at a house because we have laws.
Right. So in order to keep the regulation somewhat limited, so you don't open it up to sort of happening all over in Old Town, this is why I crafted it the way I did. And so if the council would like to open it up more, that's fine.
Yeah, and I understand where you're coming from. I guess where you and I are not lining up is you're assuming that there's all these businesses in Old Town and there's like not a single one in that district. It's all residential and we have signage laws for residents, obviously. So it just seems like, yeah, we're opening it up for ourselves, for library, which I have zero problems with, but we're restricting the only one that could or would or maybe, and they can't afford it right now, but maybe you might want to put these signs up. And it's the only structure in the Old Town, which is the church.
Well, like I said, in this particular case, I looked at the specific zoning that was over the library, right? And picked that particular one.
Gotcha.
Because it was a fairly narrow targeted goal. It wasn't a broad review of the sign ordinance, looking at all of the possible benefits and detriments. The goal was to try and be able to have these for the library and the senior center in that particular district. And so if the council would like a broader application, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I would just say the caution is that the broader we make it, the greater it is that there's a likelihood of unintended consequences and you get a larger proliferation of these signs than you may want.
On the flip side of that, if the church did want electronic sign, they could go to the BOA and get an exception.
No,
No.
they could not, because that would be a legislative action. This is a use, right? And the BOA cannot grant a variance to a use.
Okay.
They can give a variance for things like the size of something or the setback of something. But in terms of signage, this is an actual use.
Thank you.
Just one more thought. When we do put the sign up in the library, let's just be mindful of the residents who live across the street. We don't want Mrs. Boyd's living room getting lit up like a, well, we just don't want a lot of light shining in their windows. So we'll figure out a way to do that in a meaningful way.
And I trust our library director to put in appropriate operational standards on that
I don't know.
for brightness and timing. I think she's pretty savvy in that regard.
She'll just label it elaborate, that's all.
I guess my only concern is taking off what Jeff said, is that we're going to say the city can do it, but nobody else can.
And then nobody else, there's only one else, that's the
Right.
church. Yeah, there's just no other business there. There's a piece of property on the corner over here that's slightly in it.
Right.
And that could potentially be a business commercial, I believe C1. Other than that, I can't think of a single property that,
Except the
Well,
church.
except for the church.
When you look at Old Town goes from Woodley all the way to 400 block of East Mansfield Highway. So you have the town center, you have First Fence USA, you have Cooper's Corner, you have all the other businesses LBJ or LBK roofing.
Oh, so it goes all the way down over there by the
Yeah.
ice,
So it.
which
I
is
mean,
3 more.
Old
churches.
Town District covers a big area.
Yeah.
So basically, this is just setting it up, saying that instead of having all these digital signs in Old Town, it's saying city government. So it's only can go up in city government. So if we want to put one up and we buy this corner lot right here at Municipal in front of AT&T, we can put one up.
Yeah, and my concern is the one rule for us and one rule for thee kind of, it just makes it seem that way. Not that I have a problem with any of this. I mean, there's two, if we include Old Town over there, there's 2 more churches over there as well that might want to benefit from that. And then on top of that, the town center could absolutely benefit from a larger sign to bring in some of the people, especially when the YMCA comes. So I just don't, I don't know. It just, I get why, and I want to preserve Old Town. I've been the biggest defender of Old Town. It just seems like it restricts just a couple people, and then they have no other recourse to get it, and other than going to council and have us change the law again. That's just my thought.
Quickly to add, you're right. Right now, we have one church that could be in current question, but what could it be 5 years from now? There could be more. There will be more. And so this puts the restriction in place now and controls what the city looks like moving forward, long term.
With Kenneth's correction to me of the size, there's actually would be 4. There'd be the Hispanic church over here, a Methodist church, and 2 Baptist church over there. So those are the ones I guess we're restricting for now. I don't have a problem with Town Center doing a sign out in the frontage road on the parkway either. I don't think that detracts from historic Kennedale because it's not very historic. I mean, there's only one building that's older than the rest, but it's not like we're preserving the historic feel in our town center. We want to market. We want them to come there. I don't know. I just feel like we should make an exception or include an exception of churches or even town center, if that's correct, if that's an Old Town, I think they should have a right to do it. That's just kind of where I'm at with it.
But don't you run the risk, as Ed was saying, of proliferation? You know, if you say everybody in Old Town, then you may have a whole bunch of lighted signs, and that can detract from the essence of that neighborhood.
It'd be my recommendation, just take it out totally. Exclude everyone.
I have no problem with the library wanting to do that. I think that's a great idea. I travel down that road, even though it's off the beaten path, quite frequently. And it'd be nice just to kind of get a summation. Tonight, we're having anime night, anime art night, just as a reminder. I have no problem with that. I'm just just thinking about what's in the district that restricts really only a few people because it's mostly residential. That's all I'm coming from with that. It's mostly residential, and I will obviously want to
Everybody
preserve.
have very good concerns all the way around. And to your point, we'll just leave it as it is until we get 5 years or we have a bigger concern that's surrounding a digital sign, not only here for any city government, but maybe the city as a whole. Because there's other locations that we can put the signs. So to your point, if we're doing that, we'll just take it out totally.
Where would you want to put it? Like on the west side?
Well, there's a digital sign can be very beneficial in a lot of different places.
Yeah.
I think more importantly, I think we need to look at the size of the digital sign. Do we have a strolling sign? And that's it, where you only have a language type, where there's no display or static pictures or anything like that, where we can indicate something. But again, I think it may be for today, we'll just talk about billboards and signs as a whole and not necessarily that. I think it'd be better for us to go back and reevaluate what that really does look like, and maybe we can restrict it in a better or a different way.
David? I think,
Yeah, I was just going to point out, we do want economic development down the parkway. So one possibility I think we could all live with would be to allow digital sign in Old Town if it's fronting the parkway.
That sounds great. And that sounds great. Can we bring this back and maybe have Ed just fine tune it a little bit?
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe just, I just want to see who will this affect? Like a little list of it would be great. That's all.
Are you wanting to postpone this until the next meeting?
No, I have no problem doing the ordinance itself. I know it's tied in though. Is that correct? They're both into.
Yeah, you could just exclude that part. Clarify that you're wanting to approve everything other than the elements that affect the Old Town.
I think all of us have very valid points with it, and I think we need to go back and reevaluate it.
Yeah, I definitely need to sleep on it.
And then we can bring a more comprehensive.
Well, Mr. Glover
district
pulls a
view.
very valid point. If there's a location for it, it could be on a business district.
And that's why I think maybe you were postponing it to clean up the language that she's interested in, and then your concerns and David's point. Just clean it up a bit.
Bring it back the third week of August.
The next meeting,
That's an easy cleanup.
is that okay?
Could I make a note, Ed?
Yeah.
Could we focus on standardization as well? More specifically with the banner signs, banner signs, neon size, standardization such as size, timing, placement, just so we don't become I can't think of a nice word for it.
Vegas style strip.
Sure.
That's what comes, when I think of excessive lighting, I think of Vegas or sometimes Times Square in New York, where it's blasting you from 50,000 LEDs
Of course.
from all directions.
And I get what you're saying. When the Delaney finally got their digital sign, it was very bright on that freeway. You could tell from, you don't notice anymore because it's been around for so long, but if you lived before it and lived after it, you could tell.
So Jeff, do you want to make a motion to postpone to the next council meeting?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to postpone ordinance 799 till the next meeting.
Mr. Mayor, a second.
Second, any further discussion? Then are your vote?
I believe there is a confusion on the wording in the motion. It says approve the motion.
Well, I don't want to hit yes because the motion on here digitally is motion to approve. That's not the motion that's on the table. So
It's a motion to approve the postponement.
Okay.
I'll just make sure we say that out loud, right? A motion to approve the postponement until the next council meeting. So we're clear. That's a good point.
thank you for the clarification.
All right, motion passes. Next up is ordinance 801. Sorry, Ed, we're bringing it right back up.
That's okay. That's what you pay me for. So this is an ordinance that deals with modifying our townhome district. And the essence of this particular modification, or the main reason that's driving this, is that our current townhome regulations require parking to be behind the units, right? So what that means then is that in order to get back behind those units, individuals who wish to provide this particular type of housing style have to provide alleys back there of some kind, right? Usually in a public alley, you're talking about a minimum of 20 feet wide. And of course, you have to have two outlets for these things. There's geometry that are involved in them so that fire trucks who might have to get back there can maneuver. Oftentimes, townhome districts sometimes are a little tight in terms of spacing. And so that can be a bit of a challenge, and fires don't always happen in the front of a building next to the street, right? So what happens by requiring, and it's not uncommon to do that. It's more common, however, to have this type of arrangement with exclusive parking in the rear when you have fairly large townhome type developments, blocks and blocks, right? In a very large development that might be integrated with multifamily and commercial and things of that nature, where you have a substantial capital investment, right? For smaller size developments, where we're talking about 5, 10, maybe 15 acres, right? This additional driveway, if you will, this additional concrete is a significant expenditure for a developer. But it also, and probably the thing that makes it more challenging, really from a developer's perspective, is that it has an impact on the efficiency of the lot. How many units can be provided, right? And not only that, but also the circulation patterns. In Kennedale, we don't really have this kind of development in our townhomes. The townhome developments are fairly small in nature. And we're not talking about acres and acres and acres of these things, right? They typically tend to be fairly small in nature. And so because you have to have an alley here and an alley here, and those alleys have to be so far apart, you can't make them way out there because fire departments need to be able to maneuver in and out there. It creates a challenge, right, to be able to make that happen. It also has, when you have a property that's a nice square or rectangular property, it's a lot easier to do that. We don't have a lot of those here. We have topography here. We have rivers and hills, right? And so that means a lot of these lot lines that you see are not nice, easy triangles. They're parallelograms or oddly shaped, which adds to that inefficiency. So the intent of this ordinance here is to allow for parking on the front, right? In garage, or even possibly in some cases on street parking, when that street parking does not interfere with the travel lanes, right? Typically, you would require those to be either angled or parallel, right? Which those tend to be a little wider so that they don't jut out into the travel streets. That's the main reason for this ordinance, is to make those changes here. And if you look through the various red lines, that's what we're doing here. The intent here is not to modify any of the building heights or densities or allow for larger or require smaller units. The intent here is really to focus solely on the parking situation, right? And so, and in addition to that, I will have to mention one thing for you. Inadvertently, when we started drafting this ordinance, I just came to know in the last few minutes that an ordinance number 746 was passed some years ago. You'll notice here in the ordinance you have in your packet, it indicates that the max building size would be 3 stories or 38 feet. However, ordinance 746, which was passed back in, it looks like 2023, actually reduced those numbers, right, to 2 stories and 35 feet. So that was just brought to our attention very shortly. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. So if you are inclined to pass this morning, that maybe that portion of it, we say modifying the proposal back to 2 stories and 35 feet, because that was never our intention to change any of those underlying development standards. The only intent here was to deal with parking. We also did one other thing in there, which I do need to make you aware of, and that has to do with bicycle, right? We have a provision in here that requires bicycle parking in townhomes. Now, in a place like Portland or Austin, where that makes up a significant portion of your transportation model, if you will, it makes sense to require bicycle parking, at least some proportion of it. And we have that in. I suspect that this was a cut and paste from another ordinance. We don't really have bicycle lanes here in Kennedale. We don't really have a lot of bicycle paths, right? The only ones I think you would find transiting most of our roads here in Abilene are what we call the fearless, right? Individuals who do it every day, and those are the hardcore riders that are every day out there riding their bikes in the traffic, and they weave in and out whatever they want to. You're not really going to see a lot of that as a part of our transportation component. So to me, that seems a little out of place for Kennedale to have that bicycle parking requirement. So I've struck it. I just don't think it makes a lot of sense, but you could leave it in if you'd like. Other than that, like I said, I wanted to go through and talk to you about the intent of this ordinance and how I've crafted it, and answer any questions that you might have.
Can you, if we were to make a motion to approve, what was the suggestion that you would make into the motion?
That would be that where there's a table which refers to maximum building. Can't remember what the page that's on, but it currently indicates that would be 3 stories and 38 feet, because that's what apparently when this ordinance 746 was adopted, that change was never added into our UDC, right, in the documents we were reviewing. For whatever reason, there was some administrative oversight. And so that's what the standard is now. The standard now is 2 stories and 35 feet. So we would just say that on that specific row, that the standard would stay as currently approved at 2 stories and 35 feet.
2 stories and 35?
Yes, yes, sir.
Jeff, any questions?
No, I actually prefer parking in the front versus the rear. I can't stand the rear parking. For me, it's more convenient to see your neighbors come home from work than hiding in the back. And there's a couple examples around town of towns that have the rear parking that I just can't imagine trying to park. Like David's truck, for example, it just wouldn't fit back there. So I'm okay with all this. I don't have a problem with this.
Ryan?
No questions.
Kenneth?
First thing, thank you for correcting that on the building height and stuff like that, but it kind of shows so confusing when you're looking at the ordinance itself and it talks about building height. But I really don't have any questions. I think it's a good idea to, I mean, it kind of makes a townhome look like a residential when you're putting, but I know a lot of our ordinances do keep the front garage door to the side of the house. So, I mean, I see what we're trying to do, but I'm good to go. Thank you.
Griff?
No questions. Thank you.
David?
The only question I have is this being driven by any potential upcoming development coming to town? Has a developer come in and said, hey,
We do
we'd
have-
like to build this, but
We do have one development in town. I prefer not to discuss specific applicants in a broad ordinance request, but we do have one developer who's indicated that this rear parking area is problematic to the extent that it may challenge his project moving forward, a property that is currently zoned townhome.
thank you.
So the townhomes that are going on Mansfield Cardinal, if I remember right, everything was designed to where parking was in the front.
I believe if you're talking about the 5 or 6 foot one, that's sort of diamond shape, if you will, they've currently got a easement back behind them, and they've got their plat is actually already in the process of being considered. So they will have parking to the rear on that specific one.
Okay.
They've already incorporated it.
I was just trying to go by their concept and when they came to council, and it seemed like one of the concerns I had was they had garages in the front and they had a setback that would block the the sidewalk. And I just didn't understand the purpose of doing something like that, but okay.
Is there anything in here about sidewalks?
Nothing that would modify the current side requirement.
Okay, thank.
All right, I'm willing to entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve, and I'm sorry, let me get it out. Ordinance number 801 with the amended height and max building requirements for 2 stories and 45 feet. 35 feet, I'm sorry, 35.
Mr. Mayor, second.
Second. Any further discussion? Not, please enter your vote. Motion passes 4-1-0. All right. Next up, the YMCA contract, which is not ready. So we need to take no action there. No action there. And at this time, we will take a brief 5-minute break before we go into our work session.
Eat dinner with your wife.
Jonathan, are you ready, Jonathan?
Uh-oh.
We can get started if you're ready.
Waiting on you, sir.
All right. Let's go, come back from recess and go into our work session on the budget workshop.
Okay,
Yours.
thank you. I'm going to start off making a few points on the general fund that we didn't really get into last meeting, and then I'll go through the general fund changes, all the changes that we made from the last time we discussed to the budget that's being presented to you this evening. And then we can take questions or go over scenarios over the other funds. The first item, our tax rate. So the rate that we're using is flat. It's the same 0.6 or 0.96190 that we have in our current FY26. A slight change, the debt rate is going down to 0.200325. The M&O rate is increasing slightly to 0.495865. And hitting on, really, it's page 4 in your packet, looking at the net change in fund balance and the overall fund balance. So if you look at the 2-year period, our FY26 projection, along with what we have as our FY27 budget, we're still adding over that 2-year period $268,289 to our reserve. The days of fund balance that you see at it's the last row on that page, those are at the end of the fiscal year. So considering our FY26 projections and our FY27 budget, we're projecting to have 127 days of fund balance. That's 34%. And that's at the end of FY27. Our FY26 budget, which is the second column there, the 110 days, that was at a 30% reserve. Our FY26 projection puts us at 156 days or 42% reserve. Part of the reason is the budgeting techniques that we have to use, and this is driven by the charter and then an interpretation of conservative that tends to be repeated across cities that the finance department has spoken to, and that we're planning for, in many ways, a perfect scenario that we rationally know that we're not going to reach, but we still have to plan for it. One of those scenarios is full staffing, 100% staffing the whole fiscal year. What's the honest likelihood of that happening? I mean, I would say 0% if I was asked that question. So, but we have to budget for that. So that's when you see how FY26, our budget, we were expected to be more than $500,000 in deficit, and we're coming out on the positive side of that is some of these techniques that we're required to use probably don't line up with reality, but we're still required to use that technique anyway. So all that to get around to saying at 34% at the end of FY27, that's double what our policy has us at, and that definitely does get us closer to that 40% mark that we're looking at. We have hit on, and I'll move over to the changes. So we did do an increase to 4%, from 3% to 4%. That's on the budget that's presented in front of you today. We removed, and this is the administration department, we have removed the administrative assistant position and have replaced that position with the assistant city manager, with the understanding we will not hire for that position until January 1st at the earliest. That would obligate us for 75% of that position, 75% of the year instead of 100%. We also did a reduction of the building maintenance account down to $30,000. Everything I'm discussing so far is on the general fund. I just want to keep circling back. I'll probably say it 3 or 4 more times just to make sure that we're all understanding and tracking on the same. The mayor and council, so Department 2 in the general fund, and I am on page 7. We did a reduction of building maintenance to $32,000, training reduction to $6,000, and reduced legal expenses to $150,000. The police department, we shifted $12,500 of the building maintenance fund to the capital bond fund. We do have a projected surplus right now in our budget for our public safety remodel. So we'll take this 12,500 that is renovations to a public safety facility and put it onto the surplus for our bond project. We're shifting 5,500 of software to the Municipal Court Building Security and Technology Fund. That's a new fund that was started last year, this current fiscal year, that combines building technology and the building security funds. For the fire department, same situation with movement to the capital bond fund. The $24,000 for the radios has been moved from the general fund to Fund 13. We have reduced training to $24,000, reduced public safety education to $7,500. And the final change we've made in the general fund was a reduction of the street maintenance to $200,000. One thing it was asked during the break, and I do have some notes to briefly speak on it because we're not set in stone on this yet. Benefits, we did receive an update about 4 o'clock today, 3:30, 4 o'clock, where the 10% that we had budgeted, apparently that was a little too ambitious, and the city's portion will be higher than 10%. Right now, we're looking at slightly above 20% of an increase on the city portion. That is an additional $76,000 on top of the budget that we have now. These numbers aren't final, and we are taking some assumptions based on the census on who's going to land in which plan. So there is some flexibility, and that number can go down. But the projection right now, as I stand here today, is that we will add $76,000. That will bring our total general fund deficit to $532,724. I'll pause for questions on the general fund. That's the extent of my presentation on that fund itself.
All right, David?
Director Horton, so just to restate, we're projecting for the general fund to have a deficit as the budget currently is, we have a deficit of 530,000 and how much?
532,724.
Okay. One of the things I'd asked is, while we're talking about funds, and it may be good just for you to, I know you said you're going to harp on general fund a few times, and I think it's important, maybe just kind of restate, we have different funds. Some funds can be used for anything. Some funds have very tight restrictions. Maybe just briefly touch on that just for everyone's clarity.
So the main 4 funds that drive our operations is a general fund, and that's an operating fund. That's our day-to-day fund. We tend to not use that fund for capital expenditures because it distorts how much it costs to operate the city. We've made a few exceptions with road repairs, and our goal is to use a surplus from one year to fund capital expenses for the next. But generally speaking, our general fund is our main operating fund, how we operate the city day to day. We have a water sewer fund and stormwater fund. Those are enterprise funds. Those are operated, the accounting structure is just like a business. It's expected to break even, possibly have a little bit of surplus that we can spend on any type of infrastructure failures that come up or capital projects, improvements and the such. At the city of Kennedale, we don't have a separate capital bond fund for water sewer projects. All of that runs through the water sewer fund. It would be the same if we had a stormwater project that was funded by a bond. The bond revenue and expenditures would come out of that fund. That's separate from the city as a whole. The general fund is our operating. We have a capital bond fund where infrastructure projects, streets, road repairs, the Quint, all that will come out of a separate capital bond fund. Again, that helps us differentiate between what it takes to operate the city versus any sort of capital costs that come around. If we're running a private business, those would be separate as well. We just do it a different way here. The 4th fund, and what I call the big 4, is the EDC fund. In essence, that's a business-like fund. It's separately funded from the general fund with sales tax. The EDC fund does have a transfer to the general fund to compensate for the city's support of the EDC operations. But outside of that, you really don't cross-pollinate the two. The EDCs has a separate board, has a separate budget in essence, and has a separate purpose than the city. Then we do have, I mentioned the capital bond fund. We have a pretty lengthy list of heavily restricted funds that are funded from, the revenue comes from different sources, be it court fines, ticket revenue, impact fees from developers. And those funds have very tight restrictions on how we spend the money, which is one of the main reasons that we have to keep them separate from the general fund. It ensures that a fee collected from a developer for road improvements, that stays in the roadway impact fund. That way we can't be accused of using that to cover the public works director's salary in essence. We're guaranteeing that we're spending the funds in the appropriate manner that was designated when the fund was created or when the fee was collected in this instance.
Are there transfers out in the water fund also to cover the work that you do for the water fund? As
For me, no. The water sewer fund does transfer into the general fund, but that's for the public works staff.
should it?
I work for free in the water sewer.
Yeah, I was just wondering if, I mean, ideally, wouldn't it be that if you're doing work on a separate fund, the water fund that's funded separately, that there should be a transfer out covering like it would be for the city managers work on the EDC?
There is in the EDC, and when we get to the final budget book, there's a page called the common cost analysis, and it shows the breakdown of how the transfers are calculated, what department supports that particular fund, and what percentage transfers over. To my recollection, the water sewer fund doesn't support the finance department or city administration.
But are there transfers out for road repair as well? Since if you do a water line, you might tear up a road, and then you have to send that over to the general fund for the road repair?
In theory, we could. We haven't been. We've been budgeting in the general fund for different concrete cuts and different elements to support the water sewer fund, but we haven't been transferring back and forth. Part of the reason behind that is our water sewer fund. I won't get into the politics behind it. I'll just say, mathematically speaking, there was 6 years without a rate increase, and our reserve in that fund became, I don't want to be dramatic, but it was dangerously low. And we've spent a few years building that up, and the council made a very tough decision on a 5-year rate plan to build the health of that fund. So there probably are a few things we could look at from the water sewer fund as far as transfer supporting different administrative functions. We haven't, because we really need to focus on the strength of that fund. And to that end, the water sewer fund does owe the general fund for 1 year's worth of debt service on our 2023 bond. The debt service fund covered the water sewer fund's portion with the understanding that would be refunded in a future year.
I just asked because, I mean, ideally, if it's a real enterprise fund, every cost should be analyzed out, but I understand where you're going with that. Yeah, thank you. David, do you have follow-up?
Yes, sir. So Director Horton, the $532,000 deficit that we have in the general fund, is it safe to say that we need to find that much money to potentially cut from the budget if we want the general fund to balance?
We're doing it in 26.
Explain, please.
I'm gonna go to the page. That way we're both looking at this. Keep flipping to my Excel sheet, but so general fund summary, page 4. There's a FY26 projected, and that's the second column from the right. The net change in fund balance is $752,012. I've got it highlighted up there. You see our budget was here. This is our 26 budget. So I look at 2 years. So what's our current year projection and what's our budget going forward? These two numbers combined, that gets the $228,000 figure I came with earlier. They're 268, 289. We'll have to subtract 76,000 from that for the benefits. But where we essentially use our surplus for the current year to cover the following year.
Perfect.
And in this instance, we're actually still able to grow our reserve even using that technique. Where really when we came here before, or when I came before the council last year and discussed the budget, we were essentially breaking even for 2 years. So this situation is different from when I presented FY26, and that we're actually still expected to grow our surplus, to grow that reserve. Whereas the 26 budget, we didn't show that, to my recollection.
So even if we have full staffing all year, we spend every dollar we budget for, we'll still have enough to cover the $456,000 that's
We'll still have 127 days of fund balance.
Which,
And
what
that's,
percentage? What
so
percentage?
you're going to catch me lying, aren't you?
30%.
34%.
34.
Yes, sir. Our stated goal on our policy is 17, 18%. Daryl and I verbally committed to 25% before. We're pushing to 40. We haven't made that a secret. As we're projecting right now, at the end of FY 26, we'll be over that 40. We're going to dip down to this 33, 34% area. If we're 100% staffed throughout the year and we spend every penny that we're asking for authorization to spend, which does bring up another point. We're asking for authorization to spend money. We're not asking for an obligation to spend the money. So similar to how we've done every year that I can attest to, our departments do an excellent job of managing our spending. And just because we have $5,000 to go to training doesn't mean we go out and seek out $5,000 worth of training. We all strive to be responsible. And we all strive. We take this personally. We take spending the city money very personally. And if we wouldn't do it with our own money, we're definitely not going to do it with the citizens.
And could you just back of the envelope number, give us our total revenue projected for 27 and then the total expenses?
I can. Here we go. I only have 3 sheets of paper. It shouldn't be this difficult. If we're taking our entire series of funds, the projected revenue I have right now in the budget is $41,806,791. The expenses / expenditures, depending on the method of accounting, is $40,898,470.
Which should leave us a surplus of about 908,000 across all funds. Granted, you can't move the money around, but
Across all funds, yes. I'll leave it at that. I could get really, really technical, but I don't know if that conversation's welcome this evening.
it's okay. I do have a few other questions, but I don't want to hog the mic.
Okay.
Ask.
Griff?
A couple questions I have is, I talked about forecasting and projections before. So there are some things that are not captured in this, right? For example, there's things that are going to come onto the tax rolls later projects that are ongoing, that haven't yet been assessed. And then none of those numbers are captured in here.
I don't count my chickens before they're hatched.
Right.
So correct. And part of it too is we'll need to take the property tax is a snapshot. It's not an ever evolving number. It's a snapshot as of 12/31/11. So think midnight, New Year's Eve. People are popping corks. The appraisal districts, that's their picture that they're taking their valuations from. So there's an idea that things are at various stages of construction right now. What is that going to look like on 12/31? If it's not finished on 12 or whatever status it is on 12/31, if they finish on February 1, whatever day after that, we don't get to capture it. It's as of on 1/1. So taking a look, like generally speaking, yes, we do expect several things to happen that'll impact our FY 28 budget positively. But as far as me sitting here and projecting it and counting on that, I honestly think that's irresponsible.
In terms of passing this budget, yeah, I would agree. But in terms of forecasting and doing some of the planning that we're doing for the future, strategic planning, that kind of stuff, I think it's important. So the reason I asked that question is because if you're able to, I would like to have some sort of estimated idea. For example, projects that we know have already broken ground that will likely be finished in the next year. It would be nice to know those things.
Yeah, we already have a list of those actually.
On the website, I think.
Kenneth?
I have nothing to add. Just thank you, John. It's, you've pretty much done everything that we've asked. So thank you.
Ryan?
I would repeat that sentiment, Jonathan. I thank you very much. I think all directors have worked hard to come to the numbers where we're at. I will say there was one concern that I had, and that was with the public works and the site reduction that we made there. That's directly related to street maintenance. But I wanted to outline that street maintenance, that is, those are potholes being filled. That is not road reconstruction. That's outside of the scope of what we have chosen to do with the the separate bond, and that list of road structures that we have listed and chosen to replace, that's not affected by this value here. But also, I would like to give Christian, like to give him credit. If you look at his budget, he spent $400,000 under budget this year. And so great there. And even with the reduction that's noted here, that is related to street maintenance. We have still increased the public works fiscal budget by roughly 15% and $245,000, it looks like, overall. So I think that works well for everyone. Therefore, no questions, only comment.
Jeff?
John, quick reminder, I'm pretty sure I asked you this last month. What's intergovernmental? What we paying out on that again? What is that for?
Intergovernmental captures, it's other governments. So if we have agreements with Mansfield, it's really just
Isn't that
money
an
back
increase
and
of
forth.
54% though? That's where I'm going with that.
What page are you on? I need to get context.
Page
before-
4.
Oh, okay.
55% change.
Revenue. Give me just 1 second. Oh, SRO contract.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
That's revenue. That's the increase in revenue from our SRO agreements.
That's what I was
That's the main driver on the intergovernmental line.
And then on top of that,
So I guess in a way, it's not intergovernmental because it's fellowship, but it's an SRO contract.
no,
Part of the,
that's what I was missing. I knew there was something I was missing in my head. That was new. And on the flip side of that, John, excuse me. Just to be clear, the budget you're presenting to us today, even with all the adjustments and reductions or whatever, we're still economically very healthy
Mhm.
as a city, right?
yeah, I believe so. I wouldn't be here if that wasn't true.
I think it's probably because of you, John, but okay.
It is not. I
Um,
guarantee that.
And so I just want the public to understand that when we're talking about even reducing or adjusting, these are just minor tweaks. We're healthy as a city economic. Thank you. And then I just, Mr. Mayor, just to make it clear to Mr. Hall and his staff, I appreciate them being cautious about training or what they want to do, but I also don't want them to not to go to a training,
Right.
because of that. So just to make it clear to you, Mr. Hall, for me, doing the TML training the last couple of years has been the most beneficial training I probably ever have, especially when it comes to serving the city of Kennedale. And I could see that, helping across the board, whether it's police, fire, or librarians or whomever. So I just want to make sure the staff understands. Don't be afraid. Just ask, communicate with your office, and let's get them trained because it does benefit us. And then to further with you, Mr. Hall, too, my only other question, I guess, would be, I'm happy to see the legal maintenance go down, especially after the last 10 years, that budget. But right above it is the training for mayor and council. We've discussed that how this council is probably a little bit more apt to go on some of these trainings where it was just Kenneth and I before. I know Griff recently went. I know my neighbor right here also recently went. I just want to make sure that we're not undercutting ourselves because there's talks of, them doing training, but even Mr. Mayor and I going out to outside training. And so I just want to make sure we're not undercutting ourselves.
No, you're good.
And if I can jump in here, if we look at our projection for 26, it's $3,300. The budget for FY 27, it's 7,500. So it's still more than double the rate that we projected for FY 26. So in that essence, it's still a pretty strong number.
Thank you.
David?
Thank you, Mayor. John, kind of get into the weeds here for just a minute, and Mr. Hall. One thing I wanted to clarify, the city got a letter from TAD, and one of the things that they indicated is that in 2025, we had an excess debt collections. This is the Truth and Taxation letter of about $448,000. Does that affect us this year at all in the budgeting process?
It does. It affects our debt service rate. So the debt service rate, we provide a number of debt obligations for the year. So we take principal and interest on every bit of outstanding debt. It's general fund debt, so it's actually Fund 2, our debt service fund. But we provide that number. There's a calculation that takes the property values, et cetera. What that excess debt collections does is it actually dropped our debt service rate.
Okay.
And how that's calculated, to give a bit of color on that, our certified roll doesn't mean it's the final roll. Just because it's certified, like there's still things that are pending. There's still legal cases pending. So the number changes a bit as the year goes on. September is really when the final number drops. This past year, that number was higher. Because that number was higher, once everything shook out, we did have that excess debt collection. Because it was part of that INS rate. So we've 100% committed to using that for debt service. Rather than leaving us to our own devices, the appraisal district throws that on or the county and state throws that on a form for us. And we have to consider that on our debt service rate calc.
Thank you. On page 19 in the Public Works Park Maintenance budget, there's not a line item for the Ron Sturgeon Dog Park. That's about 17 acres, have to be mowed and whatnot. I just want to make sure we're accounting for that. And that may be a question for Mr. Hall instead.
We are. It's the maintenance. There's no mechanical associated with it. So roughly our transfer that we have for Public Works covers that on the EDC side.
Okay. Thank you. And then let's see. Director Horton, on page 22 on the debt service, I do want to circle back on this because I think it's important. Can we just discuss the debt service fund showing an increase from 1.4 million in FY26 to 1.8 million in FY27?
The total expenditures actually drop. We're going from 2.7 million to 2.5. So that's a reduction in our debt service expectation. Part of that increase is the excess debt collections. So we'll see that knocked down once we make those payments. Yeah, that's the main driver on growth. We do have a net change in fund balance that increases. We do have transfers in from the EDC and other funds that cover debt it's debt that they took on that the city actually or officially covers. But we are expecting an increase in balance in that fund, and we will use that in the future to pay down debt.
Okay. But are we saying that the 2019 2 million in tax notes that aren't on the 27 budget, is that what's rolling off that we're then able to cover the 2026 potential $5 million bond?
Those rolled off, and then we had timing on a few of the other, and I don't remember them offhand. I do apologize, but we did have like timing on them. If you look at 2024, for example, our interest payment goes from 123,000 to 118.
Okay.
The 2024, the CO, we have an interest drop there. We also have a principal drop between 26 and 27. So we had debt falling off, and then just the timing on our amortization schedule, we did see some decreases in amounts due. That's what's covering this Series 2026 bond that we'll be officially asking about on the 18th.
Okay. Thank you. And then on page 24 under the stormwater fund, there's $560,000 asked for in special services. That's up from $62,000 in 26. Can we just get some clarity on what the funds are going to be used for?
We have a couple projects. Get on my laptop, or Mr. Hull may know these offhand.
They're based off the bridge on 200 block of South New Hope. That's where we currently have a metal or steel plate that's covering it. So we'll do a repair. We'll be doing that out of the stormwater. Also, where we're cleaning out the bridges at, I guess, the 3,800 block of South New Hope, the new Tech Stop Bridge. That's where the clean out will be coming from.
We also have a state mandated stormwater management plan that's part of that amount.
Okay. Thank you. And jumping back to page 19, just real quick, under the park maintenance, it looks like it's over budget by about 40,000 this year. Did we do anything special or did anything come up that was accounting for that?
Are we talking about the $77,000 number?
Page 19. Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. There is $52,000 in that. That is for maintenance of the new ball fields that are to be completed.
Okay. So we're accounting for the OpEx of that. Perfect.
Yes, sir.
Is that the contract that we talked about the last budget meeting? Contracting out
Yes.
to maintain the field?
Yes, sir.
All right. And then jumping back again to page 33, sorry, it's not in page number. There's $100,000 in building improvements planned for the park dedication budget. Could we just get clarity on what that 100,000 is for?
There's a portion of that that is for the percussion park that was part of our discussion the last time we talked. So we have the 14,000 in construction. The balance of that will come out of this building improvement fund, splitting hairs between the percussion park and the fence, essentially what we did there. Outside of that, we're just looking at again, with the authority versus obligation, we want to have the authority to fix park equipment as issues come up or place shades and so forth. So we're asking for the spending authority to cover the percussion park and also any additional needs that come along the way.
Okay. And my last question on this, on page 53 in the EDC fund, can we just speak to how you feel the EDC fund is projected to end at the end of 27? Because I'm reading it right. We're going to go from 1.2 million at the start to about 807,000 by the end. I just want to make sure if there's anything missing in the context, we just kind of cover that.
There will be the short answer. Yes, you are reading that exactly correct. Where this 807,935, that is a number with the sheet that's presented in front of you that we're showing to be our end of fiscal year number. We do need to make some adjustments on the financing of the EDC property that was recently purchased. We just stuck a $500,000 number here as a placeholder. That number is going to be a little bit less, but we need to add some for the current fiscal year. So the 807 number, we'll see a little bit of movement just based on the timing of our loan payments. By the time I had the publishing deadline for this, I just hadn't worked that into the formula yet, but it will be on the 18th. You'll see that in full. Just a couple other items. We are budgeting the rental fees for the shopping center. I made a comment about chickens earlier. We have a couple spaces right now that we don't have contracts for. We took one of the contracts off the agenda this evening, for example. So my revenue budget for rental fees on the shopping center have 2 empty spaces. Again, with the conservative budgeting and the system we have to use, I don't think we're going a whole year without those spaces being rented, but I can't put that on the budget. I have to budget for what I know. What I'm very confident in is that we'll get 184,000 in rental fees from our shopping center. I feel that we'll get more, but not to the point that I can put it on the budget.
Thank you. And thank you very much for just bearing with me on some of these questions. I know they're in the weeds and the details, but I appreciate it. No more
Absolutely.
questions.
I enjoy this more than you realize. We get to hear me talk and everybody enjoys that, right?
Any other questions? Daryl, anything to wrap up?
Thank you for all your hard work on that, John. Appreciate it.
Yeah. You.
Not just me. There's a whole department behind me. Want to be clear about that, but thank you.
All right.
I make good hiring decisions. I'll take credit for that.
Thank you, Jonathan.
I do want to add, if you have any further discussion about the budget other than what we've already discussed, our plan is to bring the budget to you as a whole on the 18th for approval. So if there's something that we need changed or you request, or there's something that for some reason we forgot and you see it, please contact us because we do have to have it posted to make that change. At that point, I will share that with everybody so everybody sees it before we get to the part on the 18th. But it's imperative that if there's a change, we need it now or within the next couple of days if you see something. That way we don't miss our deadline on the 18th.
All right. Anything else? All right, then I need a motion to go into executive session.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to go to executive.
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor, just raise your hand. It'll be a lot faster. Or push. I got a revolt on my hand already. All right, it's unanimous. We're going to go into executive session. Might as well, right? Waste the money.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to appoint Elizabeth Glover to the Animal Control Board.
Second.
Please enter your vote, and please note that Councilman Glover recused himself from this vote. Motion passes 4-0. I am now going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.